Today we're going to be solving multi-step equations involving fractions. Here we have a problem, 10 thirds n minus 1/6 equals 5n over 2 plus 5 thirds. Now, remember that even though this says 10 thirds n, I could write that as 10n over 3, or 10n divided by 3. And even though this says 5n divided by 2, or 5n over 2, I could write that as 5 halves n on the side. Those mean the same thing. Now, there's a number of ways to solve this problem, and so we're going to go through two possible ways in this video. Now, there's the traditional method, and that's how we're going to start. We're going to start by adding or subtracting so that our variables are on one side of the equation, and then our constants are on the other side of the equation. So it doesn't really matter, but I'm going to start by subtracting my 5 halves n over to the left side of the equation. As you can see, the 5 halves n minus 5 halves n, or 5n over 2, will add together to equal 0. They're additive inverses. And now I have my like terms over here, but I don't have the same denominator, so I'm going to have to work to combine those. But first, I'm going to go ahead and add my constant from the left side to the right side. Because I chose for my variables to be on the left side, my constants then I have to get to the right side. In this step, I simplified my 5 halves n minus 5 halves n, which added together to equal 0, so I didn't need that anymore. And then I added my 1/6 to both sides of my equation. So let me go ahead and clean this up a little bit. These add together to equal 0, so I don't need those. So now I need to combine my like terms, and you know that in order to add or subtract fractions, they have to have the same denominator, a common denominator. I see that the least common denominator here of the 3 and 2 is 6, so I'm going to need to multiply my 10 thirds by 2 over 2 in order to get 6 in the denominator. My 5 halves I'll multiply by 3 over 3 in order to get 6 in the denominator. On the right side of my equation, I have 5 thirds and 1/6, and again, in order to combine those, I'm going to need to get a common denominator. The least common denominator of the 3 and 6 is again 6, so I'm going to have to multiply my 5 thirds by 2 over 2, and my 1/6 I can just leave by itself because it's already got 6. Here I've simplified, so my 10 thirds times 2 over 2 equaled 26 in my n. My 5 halves n times 3 over 3 equaled 15/6 n. And over here, my 5 thirds times 2 over 2 equals 10/6. And here's my 1/6. Now that I have the same denominator, I can go ahead and combine my like terms. The 26 minus the 15/6 will give me 5/6. Then the 10/6 plus the 1/6 will give me 11/6. Remember, the denominator stays the same. You just add and subtract the numerators. Now, to solve this problem, I'm just going to multiply by my multiplicative inverse. Remember, the multiplicative inverse is the same thing as reciprocal. So I'm trying to get the n by itself. I have 5/6n. The multiplicative inverse of 5/6 is 6/5. 5/6 times 6/5 multiply together to equal 1. Now, on the left side of my equation, I have 6 over 6, which equals 1, and 5 over 5, which equals 1, and I'm left with n. On the right side, I have 6 over 6, which equals 1, and I'm left with 11/5. So my answer is n equals 11/5. Now I'm going to solve the same problem another way. The second option, when you have a bunch of fractions in your equation, is to do something that we call clearing the denominator. And how we do that, because this is an equation, we have something on both sides of the equal sign, so it's an equation. One option is to multiply both sides of your equation by anything you want. And in order to clear the denominator, you're going to look for the least common denominator of all of your denominators in your equation. So I have 3, 6, 2, and 3. And the least common denominator for all of these terms is 6. So one option is going to be to multiply all of my terms, or both sides of my equation, by 6. So I'm going to distribute my 6 into the 10 thirds n, my 6 into my negative 1/6. On this side, my 6 into my 5n over 2, and my 6 into my 5/3. Remember, when you're multiplying a whole number times a fraction, you can put that whole number over 1, and you're multiplying your numerators and you multiply your denominators. So 6 times 10/3 becomes 60/3. 6 times 1 over 6 becomes 6 over 6. So here we have our equation, and now I notice that all of my fractions can be simplified. 60/3 equals 20. 30 halves equals 15. Remember, or 30n over 2 equals 15n. Remember, your fraction bar means division. It's a grouping sign and division sign in one, so that's just 30 divided by 2. And then, of course, the 30/3, or 30 divided by 3, equals 10. So now I have an equation that's significantly easier to solve because I have eliminated my fractions by multiplying all of my terms by the least common denominator. So here I have 20n minus 1 equals 15n plus 10. Again, I want to add or subtract to get my variables on one side of the equation and my constants on the other side of the equation. Now again, it doesn't matter if I choose to have my variables on the left side or the right side. In this case, I'm choosing to have my variables on the left, but it wouldn't matter either way. Since I chose for my variables to be on the left, then I have to choose for my constants to be on the right. So I need to add the 1 to both sides of my equal sign. I'm left with 5n equals 11. Divide both sides of my equation by 5, and I get n equals 11/5. Notice that I get the same answer either way. And again, it's really up to you if you choose to solve your equations the traditional method, or if you would prefer to clear your denominators. Just remember, when you're multiplying both sides of your equation by any number, you have to make sure you're multiplying every single term in both sides of your equation.